Hi guys, it's Kathy. I hope you're doing well. So, I don't know, remember yesterday? I thought we were doing the 1 hour one and then the 30-minute one, and then we were going to do a 1 hour one today. Something's weird. It looks like we're on the 30-minute one. And I gotta scroll the whole way down. We're doing good. These are the ones we already went through. Okay. See it? Oh, this is the 30-minute one, so I'm positive it even shows that we did it yesterday. I don't know why it popped to the beginning of this one. It's weird, but I'm gonna go to number 97.
All right, back on the record in.
Back on the record and ready for another sidebar. Yay! So it looks like he's still on the stand here. So we got a couple more days of this guy. I don't know when he finally gets off the stand. Is that still him? Or is that a different guy that just sort of looks like him? Oh my gosh. Wow, this guy is on the stand for freaking ever. Guys, we're going to be here. He's going to be on the stand for another, what, 2 weeks? We're going to be watching this same guy for another 2 weeks. Whew. Whew, 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 whew. All right, let's get to this. Let's go. We got an exciting part here, a little one here, and a tiny little one here.
In the Simpson matter, Mr. Simpson is again present with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey, people represented by Ms. Clark and Mr. Darden.
Oh, Lori,
The
I hope
jury
you're
is not
okay.
present. Counsel, anything we need to discuss before we resume with the jury? Mr. Shapiro.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly, please. Your Honor, once before we were confronted with a situation where alleged scientific results were presented in the media for public consumption before tests were done by the scientists themselves. And now we are confronted with a more serious problem. We are confronted with a problem where one of the prosecutors in this case has publicly announced to Your Honor on the record scientific results from spots 115, 116, and 117, and has told Your Honor that these stains have been identified as Mr. Simpson's. And once again, we are in the position that
Hey, Nan, you want to race?
this statement is without any scientific basis, since regarding stains 115 and 116, they have yet to be tested. And regarding stain 117, the test that was completed was a preliminary test, that test was interrupted by a fire alarm at the laboratory and no definitive results were obtained. And finally, as Mr. Rockney Harmon, the expert in DNA from the prosecution, well knows,
Mr. Rockney
that
Harmon?
the results of those tests are far from definitive, and that under the characteristics that were presented, namely a 1.1, 1.2, that there is a 50% chance that the offspring of Mr. Simpson would have those identical genetic markers, and 5 to 8% of the population would have those identical genetic markers. To make the statement to Your Honor and for public consumption that this stain was a stain that is the blood of Mr. Simpson is scientifically incorrect, is totally irresponsible, and we hope is not again going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy made by the prosecution.
Ms. Clark.
Your Honor, yet another press conference has been launched again by counsel for the defense inside this courtroom. I think that the press conferences, which have been numerous and continuous, made by the defense, outside the courtroom are probably sufficient. I would ask in the future that the court prohibit this kind of rhetoric, that it is of no assistance to this court. Your Honor certainly didn't need to hear that exposition of scientific information, which was mischaracterized by a lawyer who knows nothing about the area. The test that was performed on stain 117 was PCR. That's not just a preliminary test. That is a DNA test. And the issue of relatedness concerning what characteristics might be shared goes to siblings, not father and son. If counsel knew a little bit about this field, he would know that. The fact of the matter is that before he stands up and starts to accuse the police or the prosecution of such serious misconduct, he ought to at least understand what he's talking about. In this case, these stains were tested, results were obtained. The results that were obtained are accurate and are reliable. They indicate that Mr. Simpson is included, that the stains are consistent with the...
You know what I'm going to do when we're done with this trial? I'm going to make a best of O.J. Simpson trial where they're fighting with each other. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I'm just going to get these little snippets and put them all together in one.
Blood types and the markers found in Mr. Simpson's blood. We are going to continue testing for more markers, but thus far nothing has been misstated at all by Mr. Harmon. The blood results are consistent with those of Mr. Simpson's blood. And to willfully stand up here and make such serious allegations with absolutely no basis whatsoever, other than to obtain public spin back in the defense favor, is reckless, is irresponsible, and should be sanctioned. And I really do wish the court would preclude the defense from this kind of rhetoric in the courtroom. These press conferences are unnecessary and unproductive.
All right, thank you,
And I'm
counsel.
sorry I had to waste the court's time even saying that.
Right, briefly.
What I'm referring to was a statement made on the record to Your Honor on February 15th from
Oh, I recall.
Prosecutor Rockney Harmon. Let me quote what
You
the
don't need to
statement
quote
is.
it because I recall it, counsel.
The second thing regarding the expertise in this area is I would like to briefly quote from one of the most respected experts in DNA in the country, Mr. Ed Blake, who was stipulated as an expert for both sides.
Your Honor, I object. What is the point of this? Is this going to assist the court in any way, shape, or form?
Maybe.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yesterday, February 15th, 1995, Prosecutor Rockney Harmon represented to Your Honor that...
Listen, Lori, I know you had that. CJ, I know you went through that. Nan, I know you had that. But can we all just stay focused on the fact that Fozzie hurt his hand? Please, can we? Gosh.
samples 115...
Objection, Your Honor. I'd like to see what counsel is reading from. I don't even know what he's talking about. And I think that the people...
We're not dealing with evidence before the jury, counsel. But if this is a letter addressed to me, then why don't I have it?
It isn't addressed to you. It's addressed
Well,
to
the
me.
comment as you just read indicates that it's addressed to me.
It is not addressed to you, Your Honor.
All right.
If counsel intends to read it in open court, I think the people should be allowed to at least examine this letter.
Your Honor, if I could just proceed briefly.
Well,
without
Mr.
being
Shapiro,
interrupted.
let me just make this one comment. We've delayed getting to the jury for 45 minutes at this point. You've raised your objection. I take that as a warning to the court that this issue will come up when we hit 115, 116, 117. That's the value in the comment to the court. I think I can appreciate what the issue is. I don't need Mr. Blake's comments to me as to what it is or isn't.
With the court's permission, I would like to file an affidavit from Dr. Blake this afternoon.
All right.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And that was the purpose, to notify the court.
That's what I took it as. Thank you. Another matter? Mr. Douglas.
He's fine, Anthony. It was his other hand.
Your Honor, as the court is aware, yesterday, on Wednesday, I gave Mr. Darden a statement of a potential witness that the defense anticipated perhaps calling at trial. I was dismayed, Your Honor, and Mr. Darden yesterday announced the name of that witness for the court's edification, just to put on the record that, in fact, a statement had been given. I was dismayed yesterday that I began receiving press calls concerning the substance of the statement that was given to Mr. Darden yesterday, quoting from me or to me aspects of the statement, telling me that the statement had now been released to some media organizations. I think that that is outrageous, Your Honor. As the court is aware, we are currently undergoing significant problems with witnesses who are being hounded by the press. I would hope that everyone would appreciate the importance of maintaining the sanctity of witnesses who are simply placed on lists, and the court recognizes that it would be improper to release not only the substance of any statements, but any significant proprietary details about what witnesses may or may not be saying.
Mr. Darden?
Let's go, Darden. Let's go.
As I sat there listening to Ms. Clark and Mr. Shapiro, I knew that somehow this morning I would be dragged into the abyss with the rest of the lawyers in this case, Your Honor. Now, I don't know what Mr. Douglas is suggesting here. Are you suggesting that I gave the media a copy of a report you gave me, Mr. Douglas?
You talked to the court, Mr. Darden.
Is that what he is attempting to suggest to this
was the inference
court?
of what I heard.
Well, I don't place much value in the statement Mr. Douglas gave to us, first of all. Second of all, it's a negative statement. It's not the kind of statement that will assist the prosecution. It is a statement that is derogatory in nature and relates to Detective Mark Furman. So why would we release a statement like that to the press? They've been leaking stuff throughout this case. They were leaking things before I joined this case. They continue to leak things. And I'm offended that Mr. Douglas would suggest to the court that I will leak anything. Every reporter in this courtroom knows I don't leak anything. And I resent that, Mr. Douglas.
All right,
The reason I brought up the issue of the report, Your Honor, is because it was given to me on February 15, but dated January 21.
Which is why we put it on the record.
And that's why we put it on the record.
Yes. Thank you, counsel. Which is why I'm all the more happy with the decision to sequester the jury. All right, Deputy Magner, let's have the jurors, please. Good, good. All right. The record should reflect that Detective Ronald Phillips is still on the witness stand. Good morning, Detective Phillips.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Detective, you're reminded that you are still under oath, and Mr. Cochran, you may conclude your cross-examination.
Thank you very kindly. Good morning, Detective Phillips. You feeling all right?
Good morning, Mr. Cochran. How are you?
Fine. You feeling all right?
Feeling fine.
All right, good. When we broke yesterday, sir, I'd ask you whether or not Arnell Simpson had told you that her father was out of town during the time that you spoke to her at the Rockingham residence.
I did not talk to Miss Arnell, and she did not tell me that personally.
Did you hear her tell one of the other officers that?
She was talking to Tom Lang behind my back, after I was talking to Kathy on the telephone.
And did you hear her tell Tom Lang that her father was out of town?
I did not. I heard conversation, but I was not paying attention to the conversation.
Oh, in other words, you heard a conversation, but you weren't paying attention to it at that point.
I was talking to somebody else on the telephone, sir.
So you don't know what was actually said. Is that correct?
I do not know.
All right. Have you had occasion to review any reports from Detective Lang with regard to what Arnell Simpson said to him?
I've reviewed none of Detective Lang's reports.
Have you had occasion to review any reports of what Cato Kalin said about O.J. Simpson's whereabouts that morning?
Just the one that you showed me yesterday, sir.
All right, that's the only report that you...
It's the only report I've seen.
Is that the first time you'd seen that report?
Yes, it is, sir.
All right. Now, as I understand it, at this point, or at some point, after you gained interest into the house, inside the residence was Lang, Van Adder, and yourself. Is that right, among the police officers?
We were the first ones that entered, along with Arnell. I have no idea who followed. I was told who had followed us in later, but I did not
what
see
you
that.
told- Yes. I'm talking about the ones that you saw.
sir.
Lang, Van Adder, and yourself, as far as police officers into the residence,
Yes,
along with Arnell Simpson, Mr. Simpson's daughter, right?
yes.
And at that point, you did not see either Mark Furman or Cato Kalin. Is that correct?
I did a very short time later.
But I'm asking at that point, you did not see them. Is that correct?
I didn't see him enter the house, no, sir.
Because when you'd last seen Mark Furman, wasn't he out talking or gone into Cato Kalin's room talking with him?
I did not see where Mark Furman went after I left Mr. Cato's room and walked over to Arnell's room.
Did you find out at some point, Detective Phillips, that Detective Furman had interviewed Cato Kalin
I understand they had a conversation, yes.
in Cato Kalin's room? Isn't that correct?
I believe that's where the conversation took place.
Now, this conversation with Arnell Simpson and Lang, in which you were on the phone, what room in the Simpson house did that take place?
This was all taking place in the kitchen, relatively close to where the telephone was that I was using. They were to my back.
All right, may I approach you? And I believe this was People's 60.
Mrs. Robinson, with the diagram of Rockingham.
Right. We'll just put this up, just briefly, thank you. Can you point to and show us generally where this kitchen area is on People's 66 for identification, sir?
Well, I believe it's in this area, right around in here, someplace.
Now, he's pointing to an area near the bottom portion of the residence on People's 66, I understand. Is that right?
Yes.
And
Of the main residence.
main residence.
Yes.
And there was a phone in that location, is that correct?
Yes, it was on a countertop.
And at that point, you had made an effort, or you tried to find out where Mr. Simpson was, is that correct?
We had asked her some questions outside.
All right, you asked Arnell when you say her.
Well, someone else had talked to her about it outside, and then we walked in the house, and I asked her if she could find some way of telling me or getting me in touch.
Except there's something wrong with this one. It doesn't have a bell, and it doesn't have those things that come out. And you can stick a card in here, but there's only 5 spokes. It'll be all right.
With Kathy, whom she had told me would know
Hey,
where
I'm
her father
Kathy.
was at.
All right, and then did you talk to Kathy Randa?
After Arnell dialed the phone number and got a hold of her, yes.
And in the course of your conversation with Kathy Randa, did you ascertain that Mr. Simpson was on a prearranged trip to Chicago?
The word prearranged wasn't used. She told me that he had left the night before on a red eye, and he had flown to Chicago, and that's where he was at now.
And she knew also which hotel he was in also, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what was that hotel? Do you recall?
The Chicago O'Hare Plaza Hotel, I believe.
All right. And she was able to give you this information, and she was cooperative, was she not?
Very cooperative, yes.
All right. Now, what time of morning was this?
Right just a few minutes after 6 o'clock in the morning.
All right. And at that time, as I understand it, you didn't know anything at all about how the 2 individuals had met their death. Isn't that correct?
No, we had not done any crime scene investigation at that time.
Right. Because we know that because in the conversation at 6:49, you were telling the coroner that they may have been bludgeoned to death or shot. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you didn't know anything about these particular deaths that much, did you?
Did not know how they had been killed, no.
All right. So how long did the conversation last with Miss Kathy Randa, sir?
Oh, I would say no more than a minute to a minute and a half, just long enough to explain to her who I was and that I needed this information, and she gave it to me, and I said I would call information and get the number because she did not have the number.
All right. And then was this a short period of time in which you called the area code, in, I presume 312 in Chicago?
I believe I called 411 or whatever and asked for the area code for Chicago, and then I made that area code call with the for 411, and got that information.
Okay, and then armed with the information given to you by Kathy Randa with regard to the hotel, you then were able to get the hotel information. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's see. This was shortly after 6 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
No Google, guys. There was just no Google for them to fall back on. There was 411, and we loved 411.
And you're aware that if Mr. Simpson had taken a red eye to Chicago, were you able to ascertain what time he got to Chicago?
No, sir, I didn't.
At any rate, you knew that Chicago was about 2 hours ahead of Los Angeles in time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you knew if he'd taken the plane there, he would have arrived sometime in the early morning hours in Chicago of that date of June 13th. Isn't that correct?
I would have to assume so. I've never flown to Chicago, so I don't know how long it takes.
All right, but you've flown east, have you not, at some point in your life?
Yes?
Flown to New York?
Yes.
And you know you arrived there like at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, 6:30?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you then placed a call to the hotel in Chicago. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And at that time, you had never before spoken with Mr. O.J. Simpson on the phone. Is that correct?
Never before in my life.
And you were connected to an operator, were you not?
Someone who answered the phone at the hotel, yes.
And did you ask for Mr. O.J. Simpson's room?
Yes, I did.
Now, at this point, you were fulfilling the function that you had been asked to do earlier by Commander Bushy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was there any particular reason why, since you were really off the case at this point, that you didn't just give that to Lang or Van Adder, who are now on the case to do this?
Lang was at the present time trying to console Arnell Simpson, who was very upset behind us. All these things were going on at the same time.
No, I mean even before that time. I understand everybody was upset, but before that time, this function of notifying Mr. Simpson could have been done just as easily by the detectives on the case. Could it not have been?
Could have been done by anybody.
Okay, that's one. Did you ever consider having Lang and Van Adder do it?
Never crossed my mind.
Okay, never thought about that. Now, you said that before this phone call, Arnell Simpson was very upset. And how was she manifesting this state of being upset?
I didn't say before the phone call she was upset. I said as I was making the phone call and talking to her father on the phone, Detective Lang was talking to her behind and obviously telling her the same thing that I was telling her father on the phone because she started to cry and became very upset.
All right, you could hear this as you were going through this conversation?
I
With
could
Mr.
hear that
Simpson?
the woman got upset, yes.
All right. And prior to your dialing the number in Chicago, had you or Lang in your presence told Arnell Simpson about the death of Nicole Brown Simpson?
I did not.
All right. You don't know what Lang told her and when?
I
Is
do
that-
not know that.
And they were behind you, so you couldn't give us the exact timing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So now, you then rang and you received the room of a man, supposedly Mr. O.J. Simpson. Is that correct?
Yes?
Now, as I understand the LAPD policy, we talked about this yesterday. First of all, you knew that O.J. Simpson was not the next of kin. This was his ex-wife, right? You knew that.
Someone had told me that, yes.
All right. And in your policy, the LAPD policy, you were to give some kind of a personal notification, if at all possible. Isn't that correct?
If at all possible.
Would it have been possible for you to call and get some cooperation from a Chicago police officer to go and make this notification, perhaps in a more gentle fashion than waking somebody up in the middle of the night telling them their ex-wife had been killed? Would that have been possible?
I could have done it a number of different ways. This is the way that I chose to do it, and it was, I thought, done very
Just say
humanely,
yes.
and
Just say yes.
this is the way I did it.
All right, well, no, I understand this is the way you did it. We're just talking about other ways that you could have done it consistent with the LAPD policy. And you had said to us yesterday that one of the things you were striving for was a certain level of sensitivity, that
Yes.
you wanted to get this done because Commander Bushy had told you to do it, right?
Yes?
And would you agree with me that perhaps in comporting with the LAPD policy, certainly a way to do this in comporting that policy would be to get a Chicago police officer, give him the facts or her the facts, have them go to that room, wake this man up, and at least tell this man in person. That's part of the LAPD policy. That was a way, wasn't that?
Well, I think the situation dictated what happened because we had gone onto the property and we'd contacted his daughter, She knew something was wrong to have some policemen at her house at 6 o'clock in the morning. She knew something was up, something was wrong with her father or something.
We're not talking about Arnell right now.
Well,
We know she knew something was up.
Contacting Arnell kind of forced the hand.
All right. Well, you contacted Arnell, but still, my question was, sir, you could have arranged for a Chicago police officer to make this notification. Could you not have?
I certainly could have.
Okay. But we didn't do that, did we?
I did not.
Okay. So then you then rang a room that was supposed to be Mr. O.J. Simpson's room, and could you tell whether or not that person appeared to have been sleeping at the time that you made this call?
I have no way of knowing that.
All right, and the call, this was shortly after the 6 o'clock a.m. on June 13th, is that correct?
Yes?
And with regard to this, you did in fact make a report regarding this aspect of your involvement, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And have you seen that and read that over recently?
Yes, sir.
And this report that it's numbered, Counsel 0829, from June 13th, 1994, location 360 Rockingham, labeled statement. You have it? Yeah. Okay, thanks. You wrote this statement when, sir, in relation to June 13th, 1994?
I believe I probably made it the following day, June 14th.
All right, and would you, if you looked at this statement, let me approach, may I, Your Honor? With that fresh recollection as to when you actually made this statement? Let me just show it to you, place it before you.
It doesn't refresh my memory as to exactly what time and what day I did it. It just tells the date that that conversation took place on June 13th.
It does tell June 13th, right?
That's the date the conversation
And it
took
says-
place.
This is a statement by Detective 3 Ronald Phillips, right?
That's correct.
And there's your identifying number.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? And this statement was accurate at the time you did it, whether you did it on the 13th or 14th, right?
To the best of my recollection.
All right. You told Mr. Simpson, according to your statement, that you gave him your name, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You told him that you had to relay some bad information to him, is that correct?
That's correct.
And at that point, when you said you had to relay some bad information to him, did you preface it by saying your children are all right, Mr. Simpson? Remember saying that to him?
The children were brought up later in the conversation.
No, I'm asking you now, when you said, I've got some bad information for you, but your children are all right, did you say that at an early point in the conversation?
I don't recall that.
Is it possible that you said your children are all right? Words to that effect?
It's certainly possible that I could have said it. I just don't recall saying it.
All right, I understand. It's been some time, right? All right, and then thereafter, you then, at some point in the conversation, said to Mr. Simpson that your ex-wife, Nicole, had been killed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you said that, Mr. Simpson became very, very upset on the phone. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did.
In fact, yesterday you said that he became understandably, or you expected that he would be upset by this information. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And in becoming upset, he said to you, what do you mean she's been killed? He asked you that right off, didn't he? What do you mean she's been killed?
Well,
Did
he
say that?
kept repeating himself and talking to himself over and over and over.
Well, let me ask you this
repeating,
question, if I might.
well-
Let me ask you this question. I'm looking in front of your report. Well, I was trying to get it to be responsive.
There was a specific question that was not responsive to that question.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. In referring to your report, when it says, Mr. Simpson replied, what do you mean she's been killed? Do you remember him saying that, and you wrote that in your report?
Okay.
Do you remember that?
All right, yes.
Okay. And when he said, what do you mean she's been killed, did you say, Mr. Simpson, I'm going to tell you all about this? I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, how many people were killed? You didn't say that, did you?
I never had a chance.
All right, but you never said that, did you?
I never had a chance, and I never said it.
I never said it, and you didn't know at that point, did you? You
Did
couldn't have
not
told.
know the means by which they had been killed.
Right, because 45 minutes later, when you're talking to the coroner, you said they may have been bludgeoned to death or shot. Isn't that correct?
Did not know the means by which they had been killed, sir.
So, you never responded to O.J. Simpson's request, what do you mean she's been killed? And is it your statement that he was upset at that point, was he not?
Yes, he was.
As you expected. And then he went on to say, oh my God, Nicole is dead, oh my God, and he continued repeating himself in an upset fashion. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did.
And at some point, didn't you try to get him to get hold of himself from an emotional standpoint?
Yes, I did.
And he kept repeating himself. She's been killed. What do you mean she's been killed? Oh my God, Nicole is dead. And he repeated himself over and over again.
That's correct.
He seemed to be very upset, right?
Yes.
This is the first time you'd ever talked to him.
Yes.
You don't know whether or not he'd had only 1 hour's sleep that night. Isn't that right?
No idea.
You don't know whether you awakened him with this kind of information, do you?
No, I don't, sir.
And you went on to say in your report, and what happened was you tried to talk to Mr. Simpson. However, for several seconds, he was repeating himself over and over again about Nicole being dead. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
He seemed to you to be stunned, did he not?
Seemed to be upset.
All right. And then in your report you indicate, I finally was able to tell Mr. Simpson that we had his children at the West Los Angeles police station. So you said that at some point, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and this was after he went through being very upset, asking this question, and talking and repeating himself over and over again.
I finally got him to listen to me again, yes.
All right, now you, as an experienced, how long have you been a LAPD officer? 28 years?
28 years.
You're an experienced officer.
28 years.
And you've had this task before to give information to people who've lost a loved one, have you not?
Far too many times, yes.
And it's always a tough situation, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Different people react differently, don't they?
Yes, they do.
And there's no book anywhere about how anybody acts when they go into a state of shock. Isn't that correct?
I don't have any knowledge of how people go into a state of shock.
What you try to do as a trained, experienced member of the Los Angeles Police Department is to try to be as sensitive as you can. Is that correct?
I try my best.
And especially in a situation where you're not even seeing this person, are you?
No, I'm not.
You can't see his face or whatever, can you?
No, sir.
All right? And you're over a telephone. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's one of the reasons why your policy is it's much better to be face-to-face or have somebody face-to-face. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's the policy. If at all practical, that's the policy.
And would you agree with me that would be a lot more accurate from a standpoint of determining how the other person is reacting when you can actually see him like you and I are seeing each other now. Isn't that correct? You agree with that, wouldn't you?
I would rather have done it in person, yes.
I understand. Now, by the way, this statement and your conversation with Mr. O.J. Simpson shortly after 6 o'clock on June 13th was not tape recorded, was it?
Not to my knowledge.
So we don't have the benefit of that being tape recorded, do we?
Not to my knowledge was it tape recorded.
Well, you weren't taping it, were you?
I wasn't.
All right. And he wasn't expecting your call, so it wasn't tape recorded on that end, was it?
I don't know that it was tape, sir.
Okay. You've never heard or seen a tape, have you?
No, I haven't.
All right. So when you finally were able to tell Mr. Simpson that we had his children at West Los Angeles Police Station, Mr. Simpson then said, why do the police have my kids? Where are my kids? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then you then advised Mr. Simpson that we had taken his children to the station because we had no one to turn his children over to. And that, without prompting, Mr. Simpson told you that he would...
Who knows, John? You might have a dog before... You might have a new doggie before this guy's off the stand.
immediately return home to Los Angeles as soon as he could get a flight. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You then gave Mr. Simpson your pager and station number so he could call back if he had any further questions. Is that correct?
And I even believe Mr. Simpson did page me, but I never got the page. It was at the office.
And you became aware that he did page you back at some point.
I had a note on my desk that I had received a page from Mr. Simpson, yes.
But you never called him back, did you? Because you didn't get the pager, you didn't get it in time, right?
That's correct.
But you became aware that at some time after this, Mr. Simpson paged you to try and talk to you further. Isn't that correct?
Well, I don't know why he was paging me. All I can tell you is that he paged me and probably wanted to talk to me.
Right.
I never had an opportunity to talk to him.
I understand. But you would agree with me, would you not, that if he paged you after you gave him the pager number, he probably wanted to talk to you. Would you agree with that?
I would imagine so.
Okay. And when you were talking about the children, what would happen to the children, Mr. Simpson said to you, let me talk to my daughter Arnell. Didn't he at some point?
Yes, he did.
And you then, being cooperative, you then gave the phone to his daughter Arnell, who was also upset there. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And she was crying, wasn't she also?
Yes, she was.
And then you then heard a conversation that went on between Arnell speaking into the phone to her father. Isn't that correct?
Well, she was talking to her father, yes. I wasn't paying too much attention to the conversation.
But you could tell she was talking into the phone.
Yes, sir.
And you know she was talking to her father.
Yes, sir.
All right. And when you were talking to Mr. Simpson in this first part, when he was repeating himself over and over again and being very upset and asking the question of what do you mean she's been killed, Arnell was standing right there, wasn't she?
As
Right behind
as I said, she was behind me talking to Detective Lang.
How many feet would you say she was away from you?
No idea. I don't know. I don't know. I don't
5,
know.
6, 7 feet, somewhere in that area.
So certainly she was within hearing distance.
I think
Well,
Kitty
I think
would
that's
like
why
it too,
Detective
Donald.
Lang was talking to her at the same time, because she was overhearing my conversation to her father.
Okay, so I'm just trying to establish she was within 5 or 6 feet within hearing distance of you when you were talking and when Lang was talking. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. So then she had a conversation with her father, and some arrangements were made for her to pick up the children, at least till you get back to town. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And did she and, after that conversation, did she and Mr. A.C. Cowlings then arrange to go down to the station and pick up the children?
Mr. Cowlings arrived, and Arnell introduced me to him and said that they were going to go pick him up, so I called another sergeant at the station and informed them of who was coming to the West Los Angeles Police Station to pick these children up, and it was okay to turn them over to the people that were coming.
All right. To digress just for a moment, with regard to the children, they had been down at the station now from, approximately 12:40 or something like that, shortly after midnight until sometime after 6 o'clock in the morning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And were you aware that they were being watched by some police officers there? Isn't that correct?
Objection, call for
Calls
Being
for
watched?
speculation.
Well,
Do you know?
well,
I know they were being cared for, yes.
cared for, watched. Yes, they were being cared for by some police officers there, right? Right?
Yes.
All right. And are you aware that one of those police officers at that station, this police question, were you aware that one of those police officers at that state, wait, no, sure. No sidebars, no sidebars. Let me have a minute.
Can you confer with Mrs.
May I confer with her?
Why don't you have your own small
No
sidebar?
sidebars.
This is just as bad as a sidebar.
We're
I'll
all
show you,
tired of it.
Tinny.
Yes, we all
I'll
are.
show you what happened.
Mr. Cocker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you aware that one of the police officers at West Los Angeles Station, while the children were there, had a conversation with the oldest child, Sydney? And you said yes or no.
Let's do pink.
I don't know that.
All right, you don't know. Have you ever seen any reports?
No.
Reported conversation?
No, I know they were talked to by officers for several hours, and there was many conversations. I don't know what conversation you're talking about or what those conversations were.
Well, we're not going to get into the conversation at this point. I just want to know if you're aware of any specific conversation about which there is a police report.
No, sir.
You've not seen that report?
No, sir.
All right. So at some point then, back to the situation.
It was a great comment. It deserved it. It deserved that 5 times.
When Mr. Simpson finished speaking with his daughter, and then arrangements were made for the children to be picked up, you didn't talk back to him at that point. Is that correct?
Talk to who, sir?
Back to Mr. Simpson at that point.
No, sir.
The phone was not handed back to you, right?
No, I believe she hung up.
All right, she hung up the phone, right? All right. Did you ascertain when you got your page, and do you still have that little message where you got a pager?
Well, like I said, I gave him my pager number, and I also gave him my phone number at the office. And when I said I received a page, I was in error of that because I think he called the station looking for me at the station because there was a message note on my desk that Mr. Simpson had called.
I was just trying to find out, do you know when that was approximately?
I would have no idea. I don't remember when, if there was even a time when that message was taken.
All right. All you know is you tried. You can't tell us when that was, right?
He tried, left a message.
And you can't tell us the time, is what
No,
I'm asking
sir.
you. Okay, that's fine, no problem. Now, this conversation that we've just gone through in great detail now regarding Mr. Simpson, how long did that conversation last? The time you first started talking to him till the time that you handed the phone to his daughter, Arnell? How
Just
long?
my part of the conversation. That's what you're asking me, just
Yeah,
my,
well, the entire conversation. There were periods when he was very
the
upset.
whole phone conversation between he and Arnell, or
No,
just
no.
myself and Mr.
Yeah,
Simpson?
just your part with Mr. Simpson, sir.
Because that phone call kept going on with Arnell, so.
No, I understand. Now I'm trying to find out the part between Phillips and Mr. O.J. Simpson.
I would say it was less than a minute at most.
All right? And then, after that, to break it in sequence, how long was the conversation with Arnell Simpson and her dad before the phone was hung up?
I have no idea.
Because
Yeah,
you
it's a couple minutes,
You moved on to other things at that point.
yes.
All right. And then you never talked to O.J. Simpson again after that. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Now, as an experienced detective, you asked a lot of questions yesterday by Ms. Clark about details of this or whatever. You never in that conversation ever mentioned that there were 2 people killed, did you? Never mentioned that, did you?
No, sir.
You only talked about Nicole Brown Simpson. Is that right?
That's correct.
You didn't know any details about the killing, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You wouldn't have shared any details about the killing if anybody had asked you, isn't that correct?
That's,
You know, if Detective Phillips would have just said once before that he didn't know any of the details of the killing, then maybe Johnny Cochran wouldn't have to ask.
correct.
Even if you did know, right?
Right.
And so when he asked you the question, what do you mean she's been killed? You never answered that, or you couldn't answer it anyway, isn't that correct?
I never had a chance to answer it, and I probably wouldn't have told him then anyways.
Well, I would hope you wouldn't if it would, it's part of an ongoing investigation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, in that conversation, didn't you, though, toward the end of that conversation, Mr. Simpson, say, what time did you leave last night?
No,
You
sir, I
ask him
did
that?
not.
You never asked him that?
I never asked him that, sir.
You never, well, in your mind, was he a suspect at that point?
No, he was not.
And you never asked him what time he left Los Angeles?
Never asked him what time he left Los Angeles.
Do you recall him responding that he'd taken the red eye out of Los Angeles at about 11:45? Do you remember him saying that at any point in the conversation?
No, sir.
Now, after this conversation we just finished talking about, did you see Mark Furman at some point after the conversation with Mr. O.J. Simpson?
Yes,
And where did you next see him? What room were you in when you next saw Mark Furman?
in the breakfast area, just off the kitchen. I was standing by the doors or just inside the doors.
That was still inside the house, is that correct? Inside the
I don't
interior?
recall exactly my position where I was, but it was around that area.
Can you point to people 66 for identification and just show the jury generally where you were at that point?
In this area?
All right. And who were you standing there with, if anyone?
Myself?
Just you. Where was Lang and Van Adder at that point, if you know?
I believe I recalled Van Adder was talking to Mr. Kalin, and I believe Tom Lang was still talking to Arnell Simpson.
Did Kalen come in the house at some time during the time you were talking to Mr. O.J. Simpson?
I saw him in the house, yes.
So would Cato Kalen have been within earshot of your conversation with O.J. Simpson, the first minute or so conversation when you were talking with Simpson? Was he in that house then?
No, I think he was in another room just adjacent to the kitchen, which I think was called the bar area or something. He was sitting at a stool or a bench or something in that room.
And how far was that away from where you were having this phone conversation?
I don't really remember the
Well, your best estimate.
15 feet.
All right. So he was within earshot of what was going on if you wanted to listen. Is that right?
Depending on how loud I was talking and how well he was listening, he probably could have heard.
Well, let's see now. I'm about how far away from you am I?
I'd say we're probably 15 feet again.
Right? So you can hear me? I can hear you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So about that distance, is that correct?
The fact that they can hear each other under these conditions when the courtroom's quiet, nothing else going on, is it relevant?
All right.
Microphones?
It's overruled. The jury can take into
The jury has
consideration
experience on that. Thank you.
what was, the jury's aware of what the scene is, the jury's been in the kitchen.
No, but what I'm talking about is the
I know.
courtroom. He's speaking on a microphone, so is counsel. They weren't speaking on microphones.
The jury can see the microphone, the jury can see the microphone, they can see the distance, they have their common sense, as we know. Right? Right.
So
They agree.
stipulated, Your Honor, so stipulated. Thank you. No sidebars.
Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
About 15 feet away from you, Cato Kalin was seated at a bar area, right?
Give or take a few
Okay.
feet.
All right, now tell us who else was in that room at the time of this conversation where you were talking to O.J. Simpson. So we now know Cato Kalin was 15 feet away. Arnell Simpson
In another
was,
room.
Okay, another room, 15 feet away. Arnell Simpson was maybe 5 or 6 feet behind you, talking to Tom Lang, right?
Yes.
Van Adder was in the room somewhere, is that correct?
I don't know where Van Adder was at that particular time.
All right, anybody else in that room at that time that you know of?
Did you mention Tom Lang? Tom
Yeah, I
Lang
said
and Arnell?
Lang was talking to
Right, and myself.
Okay, all right. Now, at some point then, when you moved out by the doors near the front of the property there, that you depicted on People's 66, did you have occasion to have a conversation with Mark Furman?
Yes, sir.
And now, Mark Furman came up to you and told you he'd made some discoveries, is that correct?
Yes.
And so that we're clear, it was Mark Furman who allegedly found this glove out there near Cato Kalin's room. Is that correct? Outside?
Yes.
And it was Mark Furman who allegedly found this spot on the outside of the Bronco. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It was Mark Furman who climbed over the wall to let the rest of you in. Is that right?
Three of us in, yes.
3 of you in. And as I understand it, the first time he made you aware of this alleged discovery was when you were standing there inside the Simpson premises after the phone conversation, is that correct?
Rephrase the question, which
Certainly.
discovery are we talking
Certainly,
about?
Your Honor, certainly. With regard to the glove, where were you when Mark Furman approached you and talked to you about his alleged discovery of the glove?
As I stated before, in that breakfast area, off the kitchen, somewhere right around the doorway. I was either standing inside or outside. I don't remember exactly where I was standing.
All right. And he approached you and you had some conversation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And did he, at that time, approach Van Adder and Lang, who were now the detectives on the case, and talk to them at that point?
No, they were back inside the house in the kitchen.
Okay, well, I understand they were in the house. The question was, did he approach them and go and tell them about what he allegedly had found?
No, sir.
Okay, he just told you at this point, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then based upon what he told you, is that when you came around and went outside,
Was the dog still
the
barking?
route that you were helped with Mr. Fairlow, where you bumped into the walls here?
Yes, sir.
You really didn't do that. When you came outside this door here on People's 66, you walked around down this narrow area down here to the area near this, what's marked air conditioning, is that correct?
He told me he wanted to show me something, and that's the route we took.
So Mark Furman told you he wanted to show you something, and he took you down this particular route, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What time of morning was that?
Well, I would have to say somewhere around 6:10, 6:15. It was after the phone conversation was made at 6:05,
All right, so within 5 minutes or so of that, 5 or 10 minutes?
somewhere in that area.
And the two of you then walked back here till you observed what counsel asked you about yesterday, this glove that was supposedly on that walkway. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Ice cream
By the
doesn't
way,
melt.
when you walked back that way, did you notice that there were berries back there also in this area? Remember seeing? I'm into berries, so bear with me. Did you notice berries back there on that walkway?
You shouldn't have said that, Mr.
I'm
Carter.
sorry.
People are going to start mailing you berries.
No, please don't. Did you notice berries back on that walkway?
I know there was a lot of debris. There was leaves, there was twigs, there was a lot of debris from plants and so forth. To tell you that I remember a berry being back there, I do not remember any berries.
All right, you were looking at other things, and I want to show you a picture. I'd like to mark this, and I'm going to show this to counsel first. And I'd like to mark these two photographs to confirm with counsel.
26.
Okay, I'll mark the first one 1025, and I've shown those to counsel. And I'd like to mark the next one 1026.
Excuse me.
May I approach you?
You may.
I'd like to show you what I was showing to counsel here as defendants next in order, 1025 and 1026. I'd like to place first for you Defendant's Exhibit 1025, and I'd ask you to take a look at that and see whether or not that is a fair representation of the way this glove was allegedly found on the early morning hours at about 6:15 on June 13th.
Shouldn't he be asking for him in that?
Well, it's a lot closer than I ever got to it, but I would say that that's as close as I can remember what it looked like from the 3 or 4 feet I got to it.
And as you got within 3 or 4 feet of it?
Yes, sir.
And as you looked at that particular glove, did you see any blood or anything around the glove?
I never got close enough to it to really examine it, sir. I just looked at it and said, well, you got to inform Van Adder and Lang of this, and we walked back.
All right,
I did not walk up to it and examine it.
You got within 3 or 4 feet of it, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you see any blood drops or anything leading
How far away
to that
from it were you?
glove on the foliage that's there depicted in Defendant's 1025?
I did not notice any.
And were you able to see back there at that time at 6 o'clock in the morning through natural light, or did you have to use your flashlights?
I used a flashlight, as I said, because the foliage was keeping this area darker than what
As
was
he said, over
direct
and over
sunlight or
again.
direct, the dawn coming up. So it was darker than, let's say, for instance, in front of the house where there was no trees.
All right, it was dark still on the side of that house. And did you use your flashlight, or did someone else's flashlight?
No, I had my own.
All right, and so you got within 4 or 5 feet away, and you shine your flashlight, and this is basically what you saw. Is that correct? It's
Yes.
depicted on 1025?
I just saw a glove laying there.
Okay. Now, there was a fence to the side of this kind of narrow walkway. It's a narrow walkway, is it not?
Yes, sir.
And there's a fence to the side of that. It's kind of, how would you describe that fence?
Cyclone chain link fence.
Did it have like some the wire thing across the top of it? You remember looking at the top of that fence?
A wire thing across?
Yeah, like that's probably not very hard to describe. Was it a typical chain link fence that has like pointed wires on the top of the fence?
You mean the twist at the top?
Yes, the twist, Your Honor. Twist wires at the top.
The thing that makes it harder to climb over.
That's right, Your Honor. Now,
Probably save you a lot of trouble by telling you I don't remember. I don't
remember
remember.
all that description, you don't remember? All right.
Didn't want to interrupt you and the judge.
All right, okay. So you don't remember, but it's a chain link fence, right?
Yes.
Now, in addition to that, you see this blue object here? Remember seeing that when you shined your flashlight down there?
No, sir.
You never saw that blue object at all?
No.
You ever aware whether or not that object was booked at all in evidence?
I believe I was told that it was. I did not see it that morning.
And I'm going to show you now 1026, and from what you said, there is an evidence marker by 1026. Is that a further indication that the blue object was booked at some point?
I would have to assume that it was booked, yes. And I heard,
In 1026, is that a pretty fair approximation of the way the foliage, that ground was pretty much covered with foliage back there?
yeah, that's how most of the area looked back there. All had leaves and debris on the ground from the foliage and the trees.
From the trees falling down, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
It was a fairly accurate.
Yes.
Now,
I'm going with yes.
so.
Excuse me, Mr. Carpenter, do you want to show those to the jury on the
Yeah,
envelope?
yes, if I could, Your Honor. If counsel is object. Can you put them on the envelope? Press them. Whatever you put, pleasure. Whatever you pleasure. I can just pass them if you, well, should I pass them?
Let's use the envelope.
Okay. First of all, we'll show what the officer's been describing, Your Honor, as 1025. That is 1025.
Or maybe it's a picture of the invisible footprints that you can't
I think
see.
it's actually the other way, isn't it?
I think that way.
Yeah. I don't know. Fence is to the right.
Yeah. Is that this is a fair approximation of what you saw when you got within 4 to 5 feet with your flashlight, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were 4 to 5
Blood
feet
orange
in front of this,
margaritas. Yes.
It's 4 to 5. Say 4 to 5?
Said 3 to 4.
3 to 4?
Three to-
What did you say?
3 to 4.
All right, 3 to 4. And the blue object to the right, you had not seen that morning,
I
right?
had not seen it.
And that's the chain link fence to the right, is that right?
Yes, sir?
All right. And 1026, Your Honor. And again, Secretary Phillips, 1026 again is a close-up of the chain link fence with some kind of a card numbering.
He could still be
which
there.
led you to believe that blue
We don't
object
know.
was somehow booked into evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, so after you made these observations, by the way, did you, strike that. While you were there, did you ever get closer than the 3 or 4 feet and ever reach down and try to pick this item up?
I never went back there again, sir.
He told you this already.
All right, now, after Furman decided to tell you about it first, did you then walk back into the house with him at that point?
Yes.
And did you see him go and talk to any other police officers that morning?
I believe I saw him walk up to Van Adder at that time, and
All right, without telling us what he said to Van Adder, did he have a conversation with Van Adder? Did
he
Furman
had
have a conversation with Van Adder?
Yes.
And did, at some point, you see Van Adder leave the Simpson residence and go someplace?
With Detective Furman, yes.
Detective Furman? Did you go along with them?
No, sir.
All right, how long were they gone, if you know?
I didn't pay much attention to it. I'd say maybe 5 minutes.
All right, and then at some point, did you see Van Adder come back?
Yes, sir.
Did you see at some point Furman talk to Detective Lang?
Yes.
And did at some point Lang and Furman leave your presence?
Yes.
You stay in the house during this time?
I think I was out in the front, standing around.
All right, just standing around?
Just standing
You
around.
did a lot of that morning, didn't you?
Did it all day.
Did Lang and Furman leave your presence and at some point leave your sight?
Yes, sir.
Did you see them come back at some point?
Yes, sir.
Was there a photographer there at that point? Was Mr. Rocard the photographer there at that point?
No, sir.
All right, now, after that, after Lang and Furman came back, how much longer did you remain?
So when I binged on Netflix, I always like fast forwarded it through the, the beginning, through the intros. Always, always, always. Except Dexter. I don't know why, but I loved that intro. I loved it making breakfast. I loved it.
At this Rockingham residence before you left?
Just a few minutes.
And you were standing outside, and at some point you left. Did you leave with Furman in the same
Yes.
vehicle you came in?
Yes, sir.
By the time you left, had officers Gonzalez and Ashton arrived, the motor officers in the black and white vehicle? Have they arrived at that point?
The motor officers?
I mean, not the motor officers, the black and white patrol officers.
Yes.
And you had asked that they come over there, is that correct?
They had arrived before we ever entered the estate.
All right, they were there before Furman climbed over the wall, right?
Yes, sir.
Were they outside or were they inside at this point?
Outside?
When you say outside, they were outside on the street still?
Yes, sir. Their position was to watch the Bronco.
All right, they didn't come inside the house at this point?
I never saw him go into the house.
All right. By this point, when you were outside after Lang and Furman went someplace, had Mr. A.C. Collins arrived yet?
I don't remember when A.C. Callings arrived. I know he arrived shortly after Arnell had called him. But if he arrived while this was going on, or after this was going on, or during this was going on, I can't remember.
Let me ask you this question. Did Mr. Collins arrive before you left to go back to Bundy?
Yes, sir. As I said, Arnell had
No,
introduced me
they
to him, and I
found
made the phone call.
the other glove by the bloody envelope by Ron, by his body.
That they should pick up the children.
So at any rate, he'd arrived before you left. At what time did you leave?
I would imagine we left somewhere around 6:30.
All right, so he was there before that time, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then you mentioned that officers Ashton and Gonzalez were watching the Bronco. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was the Bronco impounded at that point?
It was not impounded, no.
All right. And so they just standing there watching it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know whether or not they kept people away from that Bronco?
I have no idea. I left the location.
So you ever seen any pictures of people peering in the window of that Bronco?
No, sir.
You never seen such a picture?
I haven't seen any pictures other than what I've seen in court, sir.
All right. When you left, they were still outside where the Bronco was, and you and then Mark Furman then left and went back where?
To Bundy.
And you arrived back at Bundy at about what time?
Within 5 minutes after leaving.
And what time did you get back?
I would say we got back somewhere around 6:35.
Well, in looking at the log here, and I think we may have covered this briefly, there's no indication that you ever left.
Objections asked and answered.
Overruled.
There's no indication that you ever left Bundy to go to Rockingham, is there?
No, there's not.
Well, that was your fault, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So we know you got back then by
Asked and
6:40,
answered,
somewhere in that area,
asked and
6:45.
answered
Is that
over
right?
and over and over again.
6:35.
All right. Did you check in with Cummings at that point?
No, I didn't.
All right. And when you went back over there, just continue standing around?
I walked over to the lieutenants and the captains that let them know what had happened up at Rockingham, and
And were they still just standing around?
yes, sir.
There was a lot of standing around. I'd like to ask you if you would help us with the number of officers who were there standing around and the time they got there. Can we do that?
Well, I can't tell you what the officers were doing as far as standing around. Everybody was on a fixed post guarding the crime scene. When I say people that I walked up to standing around, this was my supervisor and the commanding officer of the division that we had not assigned to a fixed post to guard something.
Okay, so when you said guard something, were they guarding this tape that was around the perimeter there?
Well, the both ends of the alley, both ends of the street, in front of the location.
All right, now, from the time Risky got there at 12:15, the time you got back at 6:35 or thereabouts, how many officers would you estimate from the Los Angeles Police Department were in and around that Bundy scene during that time frame? And would the log assist you? Let me finish the question. Would the log assist you in determining that?
Objection is compound.
It's compound.
Okay, may I approach you? I'm going to approach and ask you to look with me in the log and see if we can determine how many police officers had come out to the scene there between 12:15, Risky's arrival, and the time you got back. You and Furman got back there at 6:35. See if you can count. Why don't you read it to yourself and see if you can count them up, especially if you recall them.
They brought math into this. That's it. That's enough for me. Okay. Tonight we have homework. We all have to guess how many more times he's going to ask if he went closer to the glove. Oh my gosh. We still have a couple more weeks of him, though. He seems to be good on the stand, though. So, thank you so much for coming out today, guys. I really appreciate it. I do. I will see you all again real soon, or Judge Fleischer's courtroom, or Bill's stream, or tomorrow. Have a great day, guys. I hope all of my mods who are broken feel better real soon. Bye, guys.